Great guest on today's show. We're going to try to separate fact from hype, some buy or sells, and where this program could be in 2 years. All that and more. Today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you for making this one of your first listens and being an everydayer. Really do appreciate you. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We are talking what's the truth in the hype, buy or sell, where this program could be in a couple years on today's show. But first, man, we have a great guest coming on. We got Jake Kocorowski joining the show, Wisconsin Badgers on SI. I want to start here, man, because I want to give you some flowers. And I've told you this before. But I want everyone to know, like, when I first started covering, I say covering in a loose term, but doing a podcast on the Badgers, getting to practice, being able to do some of those things that were new to me. Jake is one of the realest guys out there on the beat. Super kind to me, very welcoming, made sure if I needed anything. And it's not that he's the only one, but I definitely want people to know Jake's a real one. So I've always appreciated you for that, man.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for having me on, especially at the new site that I'm at. And then thank you for those words, man. I mean, it's also trying to pay it forward. I've had, when I first started covering the team for Bucky's fifth quarter way back in 2013, guys like Andy Baggett, who was still at the Wisconsin State Journal, Tom Mulhern, the late Tom Mulhern, Mully, was great in asking questions, but also we all kind of, sat together and trying to figure out who's where during the first, summer of the Gary Anderson era in terms of players and positions and whatnot. And he was really, those guys, Jesse Temple, who was then at Fox Sports, kind of brought you in. And so I just try to pay it forward, man. So it's, I appreciate you having me on, man. And, anytime, any questions you have or others, on the beat, especially those starting, I'm always open to talking and trying to help, steer them in the right path.
No, it's appreciated, man, for sure. Let's start here. One of the biggest questions that fans keep throwing at me, because it feels like another year where, again, Luke Fickell's first year, people were very excited. It was the launch, and you had Mordecai and these receivers. And last year, I feel like people were pretty excited about the linebackers and maybe Tyree Walker, and this is going to look really different, and Tyler Van Dyke. And again, we're at this point where fans are getting pretty excited. The defensive line, Billy Edwards feels like a real deal with Jeff Grimes. What's the truth and the hype here? Where are you at on the direction of this program year 3 right now?
I think right now it's in a better place than where it was year 1. And that goes back to having, and everything's hindsight's 2020, right? But you have an offense that feels more similar, not exact to what Paul Chryst ran, but it's a run first type of mentality. It's a physicality, toughness, those keywords that Wisconsin, fans, they hear and their ears perk up. Ever since the days of Barry Alvarez when he first took over the program in 1990. And so you have that, and they're marrying it with a downfield vertical passing game, and that has helped. We saw that during spring with Vinny Anthony II, Jaden Ballard, Chris Brooks making some plays, even Eugene Hilton Jr. As a true freshman making an impact there. So you have player, you have an offense now that is working, and you see it and you're like, okay, this is going back to what Wisconsin identity is. And who knows, by the way, what happens if Tyler Van Dyke and Tanner Mordecai don't get injured, and are we having this conversation? I'm not sure, but defense, I think they've made changes and they've gotten bigger and more athletic up front. And I think they've tweaked the scheme from what we've seen in spring that it's good. So those are the reasons for hype, but the realism too is just, obviously they went all out with the launch and things in years past. You saw the huge hype that came during that first offseason. Luke was in Madison, and from there, but then you saw, there's some struggles, right? They went 7-6 overall. Obviously, Mordecai was injured. Maybe, I'm sure they win a couple more games if he's quarterback, and it's a different story. It's a different narrative that we're talking about 2 years later. But it's I'm very much right now. I don't know if I'm just feeling like a curmudgeon-y former news reporter now on a paper, but you also feel that this schedule doesn't do Wisconsin any favors, and they know it. And the way that last year ended, especially a run defense that in the last 5 games gave up around 200 yards per game on the ground, 12 total rushing touchdowns in the final 5 weeks of games. That's not good. You saw manhandle Wisconsin, 2 rivals. That and then Nebraska 1-2. The trophy case is empty right now for Wisconsin. So in my eyes, I feel Wisconsin fans should feel good about the direction that Wisconsin's going with a revamped offense, the run emphasis with the wide zone underneath Jeff Grimes as coordinator, a defense that looks bigger, has more depth in my eyes at defensive line and at outside linebacker. But, it's something that I think we talked about when I was at Badger Extra in the State Journal with Jim Polzin and Colton Bartholomew on a podcast. I think it was earlier this year. It kind of refers to those that they brought in from like the FCS or the Division III level, like Matt Young. It's got a prove it defense. It's a prove it defense. It's a prove it team. It's a prove it year of like, if this is a murderer's row of tough opponents that are with CFP contenders like Alabama. You can lump Michigan in there. I mean, Bryce Underwood's appears to be legit, but you don't know until he steps on the field. You have Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana. I mean, those 3 teams were in the college football playoff. Washington has a great young quarterback. You have Illinois, Minnesota, and Iowa too. It's not an easy schedule. And so, I mean, I'm in that prove it mode, and what's hype and what's real. Like what's real is that schedule, and even on paper right now, it's definitely something that it's going to be. It could be a tough year. I think they're in the right. Like they're trending in a way that they should be with the type of offense and what they've done on defense in the transfer portal, and the talent that they've upgraded throughout the last couple of years. But that schedule this year is really tough.
Yeah, it's a beast. And, you mentioned all the elite teams on that schedule. It's also the mid and low tier that have come up. Minnesota's better. Illinois is better. Indiana's better. Nebraska's better. I think Washington's going to be solid. So you have those elite blue bloods, and then all the low tier have come up as well. Let me ask you this. I think it's interesting because we talk about going back to kind of our Wisconsin roots on offense, right? We're going to wide zone. We're going to use more motion. We're going to probably use a fullback. Does it feel a little hypocritical for us when we were so excited to move away from that version of offense? And I know it's not a 1-for-1. I know people wanted Chris' offense, but maybe more modern, and maybe that's what this Grimes offense is. But it does feel like a lot of revisionist history from Badger fans that are saying, yes, let's go back to that. There were a lot of people that didn't like that when that was here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, and it's one thing that I've brought up too in the past, where people the air raid, and again, the injuries really hurt Wisconsin, both at receiver and at quarterback the last 2 years. And for me, yeah, everyone talked about especially those last 2 years after COVID in 21 and 22 about Chris' offense. And yeah, they could run the ball, but that's all they could do. There's no passing game. And now, and you saw Braylon Allen run for what he had, Ches Belusi when he was healthy in those years. Good players, and you saw them still gash opponents that way on the ground. And yeah, I do find it interesting that way because it was you can argue it there, and I tend to agree with this, is that there was an overcorrection. Like you go into this, now you're going to put a lot of emphasis on the passing game. You bring in some talent that have produced, but the offense, you still have the running game. They have an RPO feature at the quarterback, and they still ran those running plays there that, for parts of last year and years before did really well, but it still wasn't Wisconsin. And there was, and then also outside of, plays last year, like you didn't see a lot of explosive plays in the passing game in 23. You saw more with Vinny Anthony II last year, but that was, got fewer and far in between as the year went on. And so for me, it is interesting to see, but I think this offense, is legit in the fact that you're getting that power running game in terms of the wide zone, And I mean by power, not power like a sweep or where but like a wide zone. But you're getting the physicality from the line. That's being and you have AJ Blazek. You also have like Blazek now in his second year as offensive line coach, and I think he's been a key asset in not just signing and recruiting, but he's also teaching players with techniques. And I think that's going to be very helpful in this scheme. And whatnot, but you're also seeing during spring, and again, it's just spring. We don't know how they're going to look against Miami, Ohio on August 28th. But that downfield passing game, more intermediate routes. You're seeing some extent, play the quarterbacks like Edwards and Danny O'Neal were able to extend some plays in the spring too. So I think those are good signs. But it's all, but going back to it, it is interesting where people are like, last year, we need to go back to the run. Well, you're crying and begging and pleading and praying for the passing game to improve, and that didn't work. And so but it's also, we always said it, like if Wisconsin could just get some semblance of a passing game going when they're running the ball like they were in 21 and 22, the offense would have been so much better. But I know it's easier said than done, but you just don't know what was going on at that time in terms of what was being called and who was used to what and the skill set from the players. But I feel, again, I think those who they have in the positions that they have, I think they're solid at the very least. But again, this schedule is going to be tough.
Yeah, and I think the one element, and it's something, listen, I was excited for Longo and I was wrong. I think the one element, though, that does change from those Christ offenses is the emphasis on a mobile quarterback. I do think that adds an element that just wasn't there with Paul Chryst, who just didn't fully prioritize that outside of a couple guys. All right, we need to take a quick break for our friends of the show. We're going to come back and do some buy or sell with Jake. Plus, still coming up, we have a few listener questions that are excited to hear what Jake has to think about it with the trajectory of the program. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show over at Upwork. And listen, Upwork is a service I've used. It is really, really easy and fast and simple to upgrade. If you have a small business, if you have a side hustle, you can't do everything. And we're still trying to live life out here in 2025. We're trying to get to the beach, hang with the kids, master EA Sports CFB 25, which I'm still getting murdered online with. Use Upwork to take some of the tasks that you're trying to figure out off your plate. It is incredible. Level up your business where you're going to need the right experience at the right time. You can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, testing, IT, whatever it is. It helps you connect with the qualified freelancers that deliver incredible results. Easy hiring, cost-effective growth. You're going to find the right talent every single time over on Upwork with freelance experts. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Okay, let's jump back into this with Jake Kocorowski. Again, really excited to have him on the show. I want to start here, Jake. Man, I know it's been a bit of a transition for you. Where can people find your new work, what you're currently doing?
Yeah. Now I'm back on. I was there before. It was on Wisconsin Badgers on SI. It used to be known as All Badgers, but appreciate the opportunity to still continue covering the team and still work my reporting chops and whatnot. So if you just go to si.com/college/Wisconsin Badger, that's where I'm at. And or you just go on Google, search Wisconsin Badgers on SI, and I'm there.
That's phenomenal, man. I'm super excited to see you start that thing. I've already been checking out the articles, a lot of content coming out on that front. Let's do some buy or sell. And some of these were from people that sent me messages because I told them I was going to do a buy or sell with you. The first one we got here is buy or sell. Billy Edwards Jr. is the best transfer quarterback this regime has brought in.
I know I've seen these similar questions before elsewhere. And I think for me, like I think Edwards at least 2. I really like Tanner Mordecai. And I don't know if I think his stats won't show it. The touchdown passes weren't there. But I think he provided, if it wasn't for that hand injury, I think they get a couple more wins. But yeah, and I think the offense begins to click a little bit more. But he did so much running the ball, and he helped carry that team, like along with Braylon Allen, those last 2 regular season games against Nebraska and Minnesota. And I think just they weren't able to fully get the air raid in sync. So I think it's Mordecai first. So I'll sell this, Edwards, and then Van Dyke. Again, I think Van Dyke could have done so much last year too, if not for the injuries. Maybe the USC game comes out different. Maybe a couple other games that and nothing against Braden Locke, but Van Dyke, his skill set running the ball and throwing could have made a major difference in a couple of those. Edwards, it's hard just because obviously we haven't seen him against an opponent of a different jersey, but he has the arm strength that you want in this offense. He can throw the nice deep ball. He can also, he's tough, man. And his numbers for Maryland don't do him justice. But he, that offensive line last year was not good for Maryland. But you have a guy like him come in. He's also a leader. And all those guys are leaders. But yeah, I put him right now 2. I still hold high regard for Mordecai. But I think Edwards is a solid 2, maybe 1B in that regard. And, but you'll see, he's already assumed good leadership qualities at Wisconsin. And I'm interested in seeing just how the offense can become more consistent during preseason camp.
Yeah, I'm going to go buy on this one, but I'm with you on Mordecai. I think Mordecai was better than the numbers indicate. I think he was mobile. I just think Billy, you get a guy who's a little bigger than Mordecai, but brings some of the same intangibles and has done it at the Big Ten level. But I think they're close. I actually was just having an argument today on our Discord about how underrated Mordecai is. So, here's my thought on this, not to dovetail into this just one by ourselves too much. But I have a theory that Billy Edwards Jr. is going to get more credit for this offensive turnaround than he probably should, when I think it's more of a Grimes, it's more of a scheme thing, it's more of the maturation of weapons around him, and then a solid quarterback. In other words, if you brought Billy Edwards Jr. in year 1 and Mordecai into this offense, I think Mordecai would be much better.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think with just how this offense, and it's still a lot of it's out of the shotgun type look. There is more under center stuff with what they're trying to be multiple, as Fickle has said, and you hear the terminology when we, talked to Grimes, Colton Bartholomew, and I did before I got let go from the State Journal. You said like NFL style, and I know that's been kind of a keyword, a buzzword or whatnot, but yeah, I think this offense, and that's another thing too, that's with going back to the first topic we talked about, is this is the first year of the offense. They look crisp. Like, it was really interesting that first spring practice I was at. No, that's why OTAs that are allotted before spring practices have become so important. You didn't really see a lot of procedural penalties at that time. You're not a lot of, things that we couldn't see eye to eye, like with our eye being like, okay, maybe you don't know if they're like a half yard off, or if there's certain corrections they need to make that are more minute and players and coaches would notice. But, it still is the first year of this offense, and I'm sure they'll have, time to work in the off season and whatnot. And there'll be the weeks of preseason camp in Platteville, but it is still the first year. And they have 2 games against Miami, Ohio, and Middle Tennessee before they can say, okay, what's this offense going to do against Alabama?
Get it locked in quickly. Camp superlatives. Most surprising player you saw this spring, somebody that maybe you didn't come in thinking would pop a lot, that really kind of showed out.
I think a lot of people would say Charles Perkins, and I'm kind of with you there. I saw 9 of the 15 practices this spring, and I think he was somebody, like, looking through my notes, I don't know if I realized it at first, but when I saw like Perkins, I saw some of the notes of like who made plays. I think he's a name that on the defensive line that, they again gave up, it was 165 yards game, if I'm not mistaken, rushing on 4.6 yards per carry in 2024. That's not going to cut it. And they added 7 players on the defensive front, either outside linebackers or defensive linemen, depending on how they wanted to designate them. And so I think, Perkins he's getting first team reps often. And he was, there's like those among 4 or 5 players that were getting first team reps during the spring there. And I think, he's a name to watch there. Is someone that popped out to me. You can tell that the players and the coaches love him with his energy, being, like the word humble has been used. And so he's gone to work, and, it's his first winter in the offseason program. We'll see what he does in the offseason program for the summer. And, he's got multiple years of eligibility left. So I think he's got, one more after this one. So that's going to be something too to watch.
Yeah, that's a great one. If you can land if you can hit on defensive line in the portal to cover up with that weakness, that's one of the hardest spots to find because of how expensive they are. Give me a buy stock on this guy right now before this season starts.
Ooh. I'll go Dilin Jones. Is that a bad one? I was going to say, just I think with this offense, and I think Darian Dupree will have a role. He's injured. He got injured during the April 10th practice. Didn't practice thereafter from what I saw. But Dupree, is an all-purpose back. I know Brian Calhoun, the former Wisconsin running back, that's now the head coach at Oak Creek here in Wisconsin, by the Milwaukee area, thinks very highly of Dupree. When I spoke with him back in, was it February now? But I think Jones, after that injury, I think Jones really asserted himself well in that running back one role. I think Gideon Atuka looked great there. I think Cade Yakimelli, I think all of them look good. But I think Dilin Jones is somebody that, with this wide zone scheme and just what they're trying to do with physicality, I think it fits him perfectly. He can get downhill quick, take a cut, find the gap, find the hole, and get downhill. And I think maybe his receiving skills, I think Dupree is better in that regard. I think him and, Dupree and Yakimelli can provide kind of a change of pace there. Even though I think Yakimelli and Dupree can run between the tackles, but Dilin Jones, I think, showed me a lot in his first spring. And I think this offense is really well suited for his abilities.
Yeah, I love that one because I think internally Badger fans have kind of caught on, but nationally that would be absolutely a guy if you were playing college fantasy sports or trying to find somebody the next riser. I think it's a great one. Last one here in superlatives. Actually, this is an over-under. Sorry, we talked running back. I think it dovetails well into this. Over-under Cade Yakimelli 400 yards.
On the season, let's see. I would say I wanna buy it. I want to buy it. Just because he is a player that, gosh, I'm looking at his carries right now. He had 274 in those. I'll go over. He had 8.3 yards per carry. I think this offense suits him. You saw at the spring showcase, he had the 55-yard touchdown run up the gap near the middle and then took it to the house. I think he has the ability he should receive more carries this year. Again, Wisconsin has a very good problem on its hands with, I think, 4 players that can contribute. I think Yakimelli, Dilin Jones, Dupree are starting capable. I think they're going to have roles on this team. I think Yakimelli right now, he should be starting caliber. He should be 1A, 1B, but I really probably 1C with what you can do with Dupree and Jones in this offense. But I think he could get 400 yards. I think he's a consummate pro, but physically he's a tank, but he's got speed to him. And I think he can. I think we all know, and especially within Wisconsin, there's going to be injuries. So I'll take the over. I think 400 to 500 if there's healthy, more if there are injuries at that running back spot.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I have the over on that as well. We're going to take a second for our friends of the show and come back. Where does Jake see this program in 2 years? We're going to talk about that next, Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second for our great friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is what I use for all my sports betting needs. It's the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, the official sportsbook of the NBA, for a good reason, because it's fast, it's simple, it's easy. It is always there. Spreads, parlays, teasers, live in-game betting. They got you covered. And baseball's going on as well. I love betting on baseball. I'm a huge Braves fan. I've talked about that before. Love NBA playoffs, and you can make it exciting with those live in-game bets. So even if the game is getting out of hand, you still have that ability, plus incredible parlay action and quick, easy payouts when you hit. Again, I've talked about it. They pay you out as quick as you need that money, unlike some other places where it feels like you got to go through some third world party stuff and you never know if you're going to get your money. FanDuel is secure, it's simple, it's easy, great user interface, simple to navigate, great customer support. Right now, there's a new bonus as well. If your first $5 bet hits for new customers, you can get $200 in bonus bets. Perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's jump back into this with the great Colton I don't say the great Colton Bartholomew, who's also great. The great Jake Kocorowski, sorry.
That's all.
Colton's also great.
Oh, I love Colton. Colton's forever my tag team partner on the beat. He's my Dax Harwood to my Chase Wheeler, my edge, or his edge to my Christian. What do you call the tag team duos? Yes, but now go on, my friend.
Yeah, I love it. And another guy, I mentioned Jake at the beginning of the show, how kind he was. Colton's another one, very kind, very willing to help, very open to ask questions too. I love this question we got. So I said in the Discord, hey, we're going to have Jake on, throw some questions our way. This is from 38th Year Senior, which I love that username actually, because we're probably going to get there at some point.
Nice.
I would love to know if projecting 2 years out, do we get back into the conversation as a top 6 Big Ten program? Or are we talking about a new coach in a bottom tier?
Yeah, I mean, if you look, and that'd be the 2027 season. If Wisconsin can weather what they're doing right now, with this, if they can get to bowl eligibility 5-7, because I feel there are 3 games that they should win. That's Miami, Ohio, Middle Tennessee State, Maryland. I think they can beat Washington because it's at home. I don't know how. I mean, Illinois has got Luke Altmaier. They're coming to Camp Randall, but will they take a step back from where they were last year? And can they? I think I'm not sold on Minnesota because they don't have Max Brosmer anymore, and they've lost. They're promoting PJ Fleck for all the Fleck. For all that PJ Fleck is, he can promote within, and they didn't really miss a beat defensively last year. So after losing Joe Rossi over to Michigan State, but if they can weather the storm there, make it to 5-7, 6-6. If they wouldn't get to a bowl, I think it's a victory. I think I'm not trying to squelch everyone's hopes here, but if they can make it to 6-6 in a bowl game, it's a major win for the program with the schedule that they got. But you look at 2027, you look at the schedule. They go to Dublin, take on Pittsburgh, and then you have, their home schedule: Iowa, Nebraska, Northwestern, Penn State, UCLA. Their away opponents. You got Michigan State. They're going to Michigan State, Illinois, Minnesota, and Southern Cal. That's a doable schedule. The 2 that stick out, obviously Penn State at home, Southern Cal on the road, but those other games are also, I would say, toss-ups right now, because obviously we don't know what the schedule is going to be in the transfer portal and how recruiting works out there. But I think they'd be able to compete for the top 6 in that regard. And you look even back, you go to 2026, and they got Notre Dame is the key non-conference game there, right? They do have Pitt at home too, so you have 2. Notre Dame's independent, but they have an ACC schedule, so you can talk. They're Power 4 schools in that non-conference. It's going to be key, and I think they'll be good litmus tests for what's going to happen the rest of the year. But they have Southern Cal at home. That's going to be something to watch, especially with who they've brought in and recruiting in the 2026 cycle, and if they can get them on the field early. Away opponents, the 2 that stand out again: Penn State, and I would say Nebraska, just because of what will happen in year 3 of Dylan Raiola and what he can do. They're also, on the road against Iowa. So those are, I think next year they have a chance to be in that conversation too, but it's going to be, there are 4 teams right off the bat where, there are going to be some toss-ups still. And I think the years, if Jeff Grimes stays at Wisconsin, I think that's going to help out as well. So I'll say, I think they'd be closer to top 6. But obviously this is the year too, where they're going to have to we'll see how they prove it and see how they hold up against, they do a signature win. Will they come through?
I like how you said that, weather the storm. I've said this year is so important just because you have to look like you're starting to put it together, and it's less wins or loss. You have to look better as a product, which leads into my next question from Brian Shetty. What do you feel like is the ceiling and floor in wins this year? Obviously, he acknowledges the tough schedule. You and I have talked about the tough schedule. What do you actually think is a realistic ceiling and floor here?
I mean, floor, I think 3 wins. I don't know if you can argue 2 would be the floor if Maryland comes in and just decides to, I don't know their quarterback situation right now, because obviously Billy Edwards Jr. came from Maryland, so they don't have that. They don't have their NFL caliber wide receiver. Is it Felton?
Felton.
Yeah,
loads pretty well at receiver, but they're definitely losing some key pieces.
Yeah, and so I think their offense isn't going to be as great as it was last year. And last year wasn't great at all. I remember watching that Maryland Northwestern game, and Northwestern just thrashing them. So I would say 3 for the floor. I think ceiling, I'm still Michigan has more talent on paper if you follow the 4-star ratings, which you should. You take a look at the blue chip ratio by Bud Elliott from 24/7 Sports. I mean, there are, it correlates well, but I think 7 to 8 wins would be the ceiling. Indiana, I'm intrigued to see how, that on the road at Indiana. It's a different Indiana team than what Tom Allen had. But I also wonder how Mendoza's going to do at Indiana underneath that offense. And just how they respond to a year that they had, that they get to the CFP in Kurt Cignetti's first year. Well, what's the response from there? Illinois is always, Brett Bielema, his last time at Camp Randall Stadium, the next day, Paul Chryst was dismissed. There's still some really good pieces there on defense. There's still some good pieces on offense, led by Luke Altmaier, the quarterback, like I mentioned earlier. So, but I think Minnesota, even if it's on the road, I know, they still have Darius Taylor. They've brought back some pieces there, but I think Minnesota may not be as good right now, but it's always at the end of the year. So I'll say 7 or 8 wins. And if they get to that, again, that should be a huge, huge pat on the back for Luke Fickell and them. But again, I do also wonder, like I told you before, like they're due for a signature win. Can they pull it out at Michigan, where maybe Bryce Underwood is the starting quarterback? So he's a freshman, where he's definitely a great quarterback, but they're also adjusting to a new offensive scheme underneath Chip Lindsey. Iowa, we'll see how there's no more. Their star tailback's gone. Who steps up there? And it's a Phil Parker defense, so I'm not thinking too much about it. But it's also played at home at Wisconsin. So, and Oregon's Oregon. Go from there. I think they should beat Washington, but Washington's got a good quarterback too, and I like what they did on defense in the transfer portal.
Yeah, that Oregon game too. You have to go out there at the end of that 4-game gauntlet. Whereas Oregon's coming off a 2-game stretch, which I think is against Indiana and Rutgers. Wisconsin's coming off Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State. That's a scheduled loss. And a lot of times in football, they talk about scheduled losses. That feels like a scheduled loss already. Last question here. I like this one too, from Long Lake, Wisconsin. Most enjoyable player you've covered in your time on the beat?
You brought this up to me before the show, and I was trying to think back. I've been really fortunate to cover, players, and I always talk about this with people too. Like I've been covering this team for 12, 13 years now, and it's always, the fan in me has been gone since 2012, 2012 when I started an obscure podcast. But it's always, you have guys that you talk to and you can just kind of vibe with, and just there's trust built in, there's rapport. Like a guy like Chris Orr, I think maybe is a guy that just, you talk to him, a good quote, you can talk to him about certain things, and he'll give you he answers well. He's the one that really, like, when I was thinking back, like he's one of the guys that I always enjoyed, because you could just sit and talk with him. Colin Wilder is another guy that I think would be a close second. I still remember his talk after the Notre Dame game in 2021, after the dam broke, after leading in the fourth quarter. And so, those are two guys. I would probably lean more Chris Orr. I started covering him when he was a recruit for part of that 2015 class, which was the Paul Chryst first class, even though Orr had committed underneath Gary Anderson. And you just see him grow and whatnot. And that's the one thing that's always been interesting, is just as a career. Like I covered Jonathan Taylor when he was a recruit, and next thing you know, he's now what he's doing at the Indianapolis Colts. And so, but a lot of those guys though too, it's there's a lot of them, but Chris Orr is the one that sticks out to me the most.
That's an awesome answer, man. Really do appreciate it. He is Jake Kocorowski, not Colton Bartholomew, as I previously said. Go give him a follow. Go check out what he's doing on SI. I'm sure most of you already are doing that. For everybody tuning in, thank you so much for being a part of this, for helping us build this community on Wisconsin, and we will definitely talk later.